The War Between the Land and the Sea is the first Doctor Who spin-off since Class, nearly 10 years ago. It's aiming for the mainstream audience, much like Children of Earth did, although the slightly earlier time slot means it can't be quite as graphic. But it does feel more grown up than recent series of Who, and the recurring characters don't appear until nearly the end of the first episode. So viewers could easily have been tricked into thinking they were watching a standalone drama. And whether anything that happens in this will be referenced in Doctor Who again remains to be seen. The focus of the first part is firmly on Russell Tovey's character, Barclay. I would have liked to see him go about his everyday life to start with, but instead they pull him straight into the action. It feels a bit contrived that he has to wake up his 16-year-old kid to drive them across town to their mothers. Surely at 16 you can be left home alone now and again. I certainly was. It seems like a contrived way to introduce his family into the show. Kirby is a great character, like Rose Noble done right, but his ex is a bit annoying. Russell Tovey is a good choice of lead. He can play the hapless everyman thrust into this world he knows nothing about, and he gets across the fundamental decency of his character, so you can believe it in the second part when he goes off script and says what he believes to be right. The Disney Plus budget is evident from the beautiful shots we get of the island of Dragonera. We get the first action sequence as two soldiers are pulled down into the ground, like in old cartoons where people are sucked down into quicksand, and there is a really tense scene of the first contact between the land and sea dwellers, as their speeches are painfully translated from one language to the other, sometimes imperfectly, and it feels like it could all go horribly wrong at any moment. There are more impressive visuals of Sea Devil ships appearing all over the world. We only see them briefly, but they do look beautiful. Finally, we get the unit characters appearing, although not in the big expensive set they built for Doctor Who, so that was a waste of money. Kate Stewart and Colonel Ibrahim are now definitely romantically involved. Thankfully it cuts away from them before we see anything too explicit happening, and we learn that Shirley Ann Bingham is now married, so that's what she was up to in the episodes where she didn't appear. When the big peace conference begins, we get a good look at the new Sea Devils, or Homo Aqua as I suppose we should call them. I don't think it's an improvement. The original designs are iconic, with their big bulging eyes and string vests. These ones are a bit generic, with small eyes and spiky armour, but they do look good when they're swimming. We also meet Salt, played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw. She has a much more humanoid appearance. Her eyes, nose and mouth are all basically untouched, so she can still display the full range of her emotions, and she looks pretty good for a fish. So far she's been mainly representing her people, so she comes across as very commanding and authoritative. We don't have much sense of her as a character yet, but she does turn into a male when angry. I think there's probably an anime with a similar storyline. Her interactions with Barclay are the centre of the second episode. From the posters you might have expected it to be a interspecies romance like The Shape of Water. That doesn't seem to be where they're going, but there is plenty of time for it to develop in that direction. So far there is just a mutual respect developing between them, but not much more. In the first episode he had a lot of scenes with Sergeant Chakri, played by Francesca Corney. It seemed there might have been building up to something there, but then she kind of faded into the background in part 2. So maybe not. The environmental themes come through loud and clear, with many scenes of Salt admonishing the world's nations for what they've done to the waters. The elaborate scene where they fetch a glass of river water seems a bit heavy-handed, as you can't really drink river water regardless of pollution, unless it's right from the source. The target they come up with of 50% less pollution by 2065 seems reasonable, although it's probably far too optimistic for the real world, where there's nobody holding us to account. The big set piece comes when the sea dwellers rain down all the plastic from the oceans down onto the cities. It's a great visual metaphor, the sort of thing you might see in anti-pollution adverts. There is a bit of a disaster movie feel to these scenes, with Barclay's family caught up in it and barely making it through. I did think they might take the opportunity to kill off his ex, but sadly not. The villains of the story, apart from the whole human race, seem to be Patrick Bollidy as a petrol company boss, as well as generals from America and France. So far they haven't really done much, apart from steal samples of sea technology. I would imagine they'll end up doing something to jeopardise the peace process, but then Barclay and Salt will have to work together to stop them. How it will all end is another question. If this was a standalone, then anything goes. but of course Doctor Who will have to follow on from this eventually. Usually things like First Contact are just swept under the rug so they can do them all over again. So it's doubtful we'll end up with a world where land dwellers are forbidden from crossing the seas. Although it would be interesting to see what that would be like. Maybe the sea dwellers would allow wind-powered ships which don't give any pollution, so we'd end up with a world a bit like One Piece. But as it's Doctor Who, I would imagine the sea dwellers will end up either dead or back in hibernation, as that's what they usually do. Still, the show is off to a strong start. So far it's more the peace conference between the land and the sea than anything involving war, but there's still plenty of time for that. And I look forward to seeing how it develops in the next 3 episodes. Next week it looks like Barclay will be going down into the Sea Dwellers world. We've never really seen that before, so it could be some spectacular underground kingdom like Atlantis. Will Barclay and Salt end up creating a new race of hybrids, or will he just get back with his wife? I don't know, but I'm looking forward to finding out. I'll be back here next Wednesday with my review of the next 2 episodes, so press subscribe if you want to make sure to see that, and I'll see you next time.